So I'm not going to go into too much detail about myself or Reach, but in short, Reach was set up by Shannon Eidman, who you'll hear from later, and myself 5 years ago this month. So we specialise in providing assessment, therapeutic support for children with behavioural, learning, social, emotional differences. Our services include psychoeducational assessments to address specific learning difficulties and multidisciplinary autism assessments. So initially, my focus was on supporting young children, but what happened was as they grew, so did my interests. So my interests evolved and I started supporting school-age children and teenagers. Presently, I'm working with children from an age range of just little babies at 18 months up to 18 years. And then on a personal note, I am a parent to 4 children. So I have a 7-year-old daughter, 4-year-old little boy, and I have 1-year-old twins. So as you can imagine, life is busy, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not sure if I'd know how to do it any other way. So I just hope this presentation meets your expectations. And I just want to make the point, because I work primarily with children, I'm likely to use the word child or children, but the content I'm sharing is relevant across age groups. So I'll do my best to use a general term and maybe individual, but just apologies if I do say child. Okay. So this morning's presentation is on working together to support emotion regulation. And the content is aimed at parents, teachers, caregivers in general. So I want to begin by exploring the concept of emotion regulation and its significance. So to provide a starting point, emotion regulation has been defined as the awareness of personal emotional experiences, the ability to accurately recognize your own emotions, and then the capacity to modulate your emotional responses in accordance with the situational demands or your individual goals. So why is this important? So research has indicated that emotion dysregulation predicts increases in social and behavioral difficulties across time. And it's also shown that this will remain stable across time without intervention. So it's very important that we put tools in place to support individuals. Okay, so what do we think of when we think of an emotionally regulated person? What does that look like for you? So I would like if you would just take a moment and think about the image that comes to your mind when you think of an emotionally regulated person. I'll just give you a few seconds to think about that. So do you see someone who's happy and relaxed? Are they calm and composed? Maybe you're imagining someone who's unaffected by specific events. So one of the first things I want to highlight is emotion regulation isn't about eliminating negative emotions. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's not about expecting a constant calmness and happiness. So the emotions themselves aren't the issue. Rather, it's our responses and our reactions to the emotions that present an actual challenge. So another definition before we get in. So what does the literature reveal about emotion regulation? So emotion regulation requires being able to recognize your emotional states, being able to have strategies for soothing and relaxing during intense excitement, arousal, negative emotions, and then having the capacity to be able to sustain progress in activities despite potentially disruptive emotions. So when you hear this, you might think, well, that's a great expectation. And that's because it is. So emotion regulation is a multifaceted skill and it has various components. So what I want to address is how can we provide supports for individuals, irrespective of their current abilities, and help them to manage their emotions effectively. So what can we do when the individuals we support and care for do not yet have the skills to regulate emotionally? How can we prevent dysregulation while emotion regulation skills are being taught? So one thing we can do is co-regulate. So what co-regulation refers to is the process where individuals' emotional and behavioral regulation is supported and guided by a responsive and attuned caregiver or adult. So it involves the caregiver providing a secure and nurturing environment that helps the individual manage their emotions and behaviors effectively. So co-regulation supports emotion regulation because it provides individuals with the necessary scaffolding to understand, express, and manage their emotions in a healthy way. So you as a caregiver, you can model appropriate emotional responses, provide comfort during distressing times, and you can help your individual to navigate challenging situations. And then as these individuals experience co-regulation, they can learn to self-regulate and develop resilience. And this is going to lead to an improved emotional well-being and adaptive behaviors in various different social and environmental contexts. So when we want to support through co-regulation, it is really important that we are regulated ourselves. So from the slides, we can see that we can make steps for progress towards self-regulation. So by having a caring adult, caring supportive adult who is self-regulated, they can then set the foundation to support their individual in co-regulation, through co-regulation. And then that's setting the foundation for an individual being able to become self-regulated. So how do we ensure that we are regulated? How do we co-regulate and how do we foster self-regulation? So let's take a look. So as I've just mentioned, the first step in supporting someone in regulating their emotions is ensuring that you are regulated yourself. So if you approach someone with the intention of providing support, but you are dysregulated yourself, it's very likely to lead to a less favorable outcome. So it's important to put on your own oxygen mask so that you can effectively support the person you're caring for. And I know, I might say many, all of us have very limited available time. So what can you do to regulate your own emotions? So if you just think back to what I just covered, it's essential for you to have the same skills that we're aiming to teach those people under our care. So if you can remember what they were, it was being able to recognize your emotional states, being able to access strategies for soothing or relaxing, and then being able to sustain progress despite disruptive emotions. So how can we put on our own masks and become more psychologically flexible? So if you are new to the term, psychological flexibility refers to the ability to recognize and adapt to situational demands and remain aware and open to the present moment so that you can recognize and shift behavior strategies as required. And then you can engage in actions that are aligned with your values. And I know this is not just parent specific, but research has shown that parenting focused in the present moment is related to a better adaptive emotion regulation and attachment in children. And it's also linked to more emotion regulation, compassion, and psychological flexibility in adolescents. So the following points I am going to very briefly skim over. Just with our allocated time, I want to make sure I'm getting to actual practical strategies. So quick, one slide, one sentence, but you get the idea. So first, present moment awareness is when you are able to pay attention on purpose. So what this looks like for parents, teachers, caregivers, anybody, is being able to, at various points of your day, slowing down and being able to experience using your 5 senses. So it's paying purposeful attention to small things that are meaningful. And it might be things you're meaningful, things you're grateful for. So this might be drinking a cup of coffee, might be feeling the water from the shower on your back, and it might be maybe a quiet moment in between all of the collections and drop-offs during the day. Then we want to have acceptance. So this is when we are aware of and open to the emotions and feelings that we are experiencing. So instead of fighting with our thoughts and emotions and resisting them, running away from them, maybe getting overwhelmed by them, we want to open up and just let our emotions and thoughts be. Next, we have diffusion. So diffusion is when you are able to create space between your thoughts and yourself. So how we would do this, lots of different ways we can do this, but one way we can do it is using the statement, I notice I am having the thought that. So this is a strategy that you can practice many times during the day. And what it's trying to do is reinforce the fact that you are not your thoughts. You have thoughts, but you are not them. So it's trying to create some space between you and your thoughts. So instead of me saying, I'm such a bad mom, like, I just can't get this right. Everything is, no matter how much I try, everything goes wrong, you know? I can say, I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a bad mom, and that is what it is. It's a thought. So just calling it what it is creates space. It's not I am a bad mom, it's I am having a thought that. I'm noticing that I want to elaborate more, but I need to keep myself on track. So perspective taking is also really important. So when you have a few moments to yourself, if you can slow down and notice yourself, what's happening between you and your child, teen or adult, whoever you're supporting. So think about an interaction that's happened and try and make yourself aware of potentially unhelpful patterns, such as avoidance, and also notice and reinforce wins that you may be unaware of. And mindfulness is probably one that people are a lot more familiar with. You might have heard this word, I'm sure you've all heard this word. But if we think about it in behavioral terms, mindfulness and acceptance processes involve paying purposeful attention to the present moment. And it allows and makes space for unwanted thoughts and emotions, and it relinquishes attachment to thoughts. So we might spend a little minute going through. Let me see how we're going for time. Okay. I think we're okay. So when I think of mindfulness, I used to say to myself, I don't have time. Okay, I don't have time for mindfulness. I can't fit it in during the day. But what I want you to know and remember is that it doesn't need to be completed in a silent room. Mindfulness can be completed anywhere. You think of advanced level mindfulness is when you are able to be amongst the absolute chaos of life and you're able to bring a moment of calm to your mind. So mindfulness can be completed while you're in the shower, it can be while you're eating your breakfast. Maybe it's when you're putting on your morning makeup, styling your hair. Better give an example for the males in the audience, shaving. It can be any time during your usual everyday routine. And it can be 1 minute, it can be 10. So what I recommend and what I try to do is make it part of my already established routine. So you're much more likely to take a mindful moment during your day if you do it as part of a routine. And I was going to go through a mindfulness exercise, but I think for the purpose of time, I will move on, and then if we're doing okay, I might come back to that. Okay, and next we're going to look at committed actions. So what this is making a goal, setting a goal for yourself, something that's important to you, It doesn't matter how big or small it is, but we want you to start small. And what I'd like you to do is set this goal for yourself and just practice, 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 practice. So maybe it is, I am going to, spend 2 minutes doing mindfulness every day. That doesn't sound like practice, 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 right? We can start small. Maybe we're going to try do it for 30 seconds, 4 times in the day. It can be whatever you want the goal to be. And what I would encourage is something as simple as, when I notice my emotions, I am going to label them. And that sounds like a simple thing, but it's something a lot of us don't do. When we notice a feeling, we try to suppress it. Feel like it's not helpful. So that might be a goal for you. When I notice my emotions, I'm going to say it. So when I'm frustrated, I'm going to say, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm really frustrated right now, and that's okay. And if you notice, and I'm doing it, I suppose, more naturally because of the field I'm in, because of my role, but instead of saying I'm frustrated, adding and now would actually be a diffusion technique. So changing your language from saying I'm frustrated, I'm frustrated, I'm frustrated to I notice I'm feeling frustrated right now. So creating space and pursuing your goals. And that is if a value to you is improving your emotion regulation for you and your child. And very importantly, having self-compassion for yourself. So it looks at self-compassion involves self-kindness and awareness of our common humanity and a willingness to acknowledge difficult thoughts and emotions without attachment. So self-compassion builds resilience, and it is very important for us to be kind to ourselves. So I know it sounds great, but a lot of us are very good at telling ourselves things that are unkind, and we forget to be kind to ourselves. And let's have a little slide put in here then on self-care. So have you taken some time to focus on self-care? This is definitely one I personally struggled with for a long time. Working, a business, 4 kids, life is busy, as I'd imagine every single person on this presentation understands and experiences. So what I've learned is that the duration isn't important. So for those of you with little to no free time, what's important is just taking these small moments. So some examples you can see on the screen. And what I'm going to do is just ask you all to join me and take a moment to practice some self-care. So we're going to, if you would like to, you don't have to, of course, optional. We're going to take 5 slow, deep breaths. So breathe in and breathe out. 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 And that is also to help myself, settle myself. But I noticed during it, instead of being mindful, that I lost track of the number of breaths I had taken. So maybe it wasn't the most mindful moment for me, but it was still helpful, right? And maybe we will engage in a little gentle stretching, because sitting still, for me, can be difficult for sitting still for a long time. So I want you to slowly move your head again, if you wish, towards your right shoulder. Gently stretching your neck as far as it wants to go. Notice the sensation. Now slowly come back to the center. Then move your head to your left shoulder. Mindfully stretching. And just notice how your body feels right now. And then bring your head back to the center and settle into your posture. Okay, thank you for those that participated, and I hope that was helpful and not frustrating for you. I know for me personally, when I started doing some breathing exercises, I found them hard to focus on. So, okay, you know what? We'll take a step further. I see there it says smile. So if you could see the pictures of all the attendees, you could see lots of wonderful smiles, but I know we can't do that right now. So yeah, sometimes smiling can be very helpful, and someone notices you smiling, they're likely to, take that prompt and smile back. Okay, so moving on to the next piece, how can we support co-regulation? So the first thing is to establish a strong emotional connection with the individual. So this can be through offering comfort, reassurance, and physical touch when needed. You can help regulate the individual's emotions and provide a sense of safety by doing this. And this is especially important during times of distress or upset, and if they seek these forms of comfort and support to feel secure and understood. So take the example of an individual is feeling upset because they want to turn with a toy. You could offer comfort by saying, I understand that you're feeling disappointed about not having a turn, and that's okay to feel this way, and I'm here for you. So what we're doing is we're providing a verbal acknowledgement along with maybe a reassuring touch or a hug, and this can help the individual to feel understood and supported and help them regulate their emotions. So we play a really crucial role in modeling healthy emotion regulation for individuals by demonstrating self-calming techniques like we just spoke about, like the deep breathing, like the mindfulness, the positive self-talk. We as caregivers provide powerful examples for the individuals we support to learn from. So the children, teenagers, adults we care for can observe and imitate often the behavior of us as adults. So it makes it essential for us to effectively regulate our emotions. So like I was saying about the feeling frustrated, you might say, I'm feeling frustrated right now, and I'm going to take a few deep breaths to help myself calm down. So by verbalizing and demonstrating this self-calming technique, you're managing your own emotions, but you're also teaching the individual a valuable skill for regulating their emotions. Okay. Acknowledging and validating a person's emotions is essential for developing a supportive environment. So when you demonstrate empathy and understanding, you can help an individual feel heard and supported. And this will help them develop a sense of emotional security. So validation of emotions can significantly impact a person's emotional well-being and their ability to regulate their feelings. So if someone's feeling frustrated, you might say, I understand this task is difficult for you and it's okay to feel frustrated. I'm here and I can help you figure it out. So we're acknowledging and validating their emotions and offering support, and this can reassure them and give them again a sense of emotional security. Okay, so there are just some ways. But what you might be wondering is there a behavioural model that can support a child emotionally while still encouraging safer, more helpful behaviours? So Whittingham has developed a behaviour model that will support emotion regulation. This model is an empathetic and accepting response to emotions, and it addresses behaviours in the context of strong emotions using relational, emotional, and behavioural principles simultaneously. So first, it's important to make the distinction between emotions and behaviours. The child's emotions, using the word child, the child, adult, individual's emotions are to be accepted and validated, and then their effective signalling of needs are going to be responded to sensitively. So we want to allow for the adaptive, and this is as adaptive as developmentally appropriate or possible. It'll depend on the individual's ability. So we're going to allow for as adaptive as the adaptive expression of emotions, while we're going to shape the individual's behavior. So if the problematic behavior requires immediate response, we might help with that behavior first. So what this model is that it's a comprehensive framework for supporting emotion regulation while we're guiding behavior in a way that's going to promote safety and well-being. So we are going to acknowledge and validate their emotions and address their needs sensitively. And this way we can foster adaptive emotional expression and behavior. So shape and move on. So shape and connect is, you most likely understand what the word connect means. So that's the connection piece. And then shaping. So what is that? For those that don't know, shaping is a method that's used to develop new and advanced behaviors. And what it does is it reinforces small steps that lead to a desired behavior. So it's like building a skill or a habit by recognizing and encouraging progress along the way. So shaping is a really important technique for guiding a child's behavior and helping them to learn new skills. I notice I said child again, so just you can strike it off each time I say it and replace with individual. So step one, when the individual is maybe distressed, we want you to acknowledge and reflect. So try your best to offer a label for that big emotion. And if it's possible, or where you know, acknowledge what the trigger or reason is. So that might be something like, I notice you're really sad. I think you really want your turn with the iPad right now, and I know it can be so hard to wait. And the individual might be crying or screaming. They might be engaging in other behaviors. And it's okay to let them know that you understand they're frustrated and to show compassion. And then you're thinking, okay, this is a bit confusing maybe compared to, don't give attention when, or what does this look like? So what's happening is we're not giving attention to the concerning behavior. Instead, we're focusing on the emotion. So we're validating the emotion verbally and labeling it. For example, it's tough, you're feeling sad. If there is a case where you might suspect that the emotion is a display to achieve maybe a specific outcome, then you could instead focus on what the child's looking for. So example, you might say, you want to keep playing and I understand that. So by acknowledging, you're being understanding and compassionate, and you're also remaining calm and matter of fact. So it's the example, I notice you're really sad. I think you really want your turn with the iPad right now. I know it can be hard to wait. So let them know you understand they're frustrated and show compassion. And then step two, we want to provide guidance and support and encouragement to help the individual perform a relevant behavior. So this is a behavior that would be more helpful in the situation, but it's a behavior that wouldn't yet come naturally to the individual. So this scaffold can look different. It will look different for each individual. And it's going to take the form of maybe a simple prompt or maybe a reminder that a particular form of reinforcement is available given a particular behavior. So it might look like reminding the individual of the availability of your support, your help, your soothing, whatever it might be. And it might sound like, if you want help, just ask. Or it could be, I'm here with a cuddle if you want. Again, this is very individual to each person. So there'd be an endless list of examples for covering all people. And you know your individual best, and you would know what that might sound like or look like for them. So in considering the example, you might suggest maybe you could wait until your brother is finished that video, and then you could ask for a turn. Or they might ask, when can I have a turn? Another alternative for some children would be to encourage some mindfulness activity to support time regulating. So this would be a good time to embed that. But please remember that during times of extreme distress, it's very likely to be very difficult for an individual to process all of this. So what you need to do is make your request simple and be generous with the help you can offer. So remain within distance with an open and calm body language and convey acceptance for their current emotional state. And at this point, you might need to scaffold again. So you might give a reminder and say, I am happy to help. And again, the example I'm going to give is dependent on the child or adult, whatever age the person might be. It might be just say help if you want me to help. So you make your emotional availability and support clear, but without making the assistance or soothing contingent on the behavior of concern. So instead, the soothing and assistance is contingent upon that adaptive behavior, such as asking for help. And I know I'm giving skills that are, I suppose, a lot of us here, our children, teenagers, adults might not be able to ask for help. Asking for help doesn't need to be using words. It might be approaching the person for a cuddle. It might be just an approach. So I'm going to mention that a little bit more in a moment. So step 3 is to wait and watch. So it's important to offer time and space for your individual to respond. So depending on their level of distress, you can find yourself waiting for what seems like an eternity, okay? So if you notice that you're, oh my goodness, how long are we going to stand here? That sounds like a really good time for you to practice some mindfulness yourself. And remember, we need to be regulated ourselves to support our individuals. So if you appear frantic or agitated, you are only going to add to your child's distress. And this is likely going to prolong the situation. So remain near without responding verbally to the difficult behavior. And then while you continue to show acceptance and empathy non-verbally, you're not going to respond to shouting, banging fists on the table. Instead, you'll wait and watch for any display of movement towards a more helpful behavior. And when you observe an adaptive behavior or an approximation of an adaptive behavior, so this could include a child or individual approaching you for soothing or asking for help. And I mentioned this slightly a moment ago, but the shift can be so subtle. It might be just taking a step physically towards you. Okay, we're not trying to ask for a huge adaptive behavior, a difficult or complex adaptive behavior. We're looking for any approximation. Remember, we're shaping small and building on it. So any approximation is going to be, we'll see next, reinforced. So we're aiming to shape adaptive behavior, and it is the behavior that we're shaping. We're not shaping the emotions. Remember, if we think back to the beginning of the presentation, emotions we're not trying to change, suppress emotions. It's the behavior we're trying to shape. It's the responses and reactions to the emotions that we're looking at. And step 4 is reinforce. So reinforcement, a reward that works. So after the individual demonstrates any positive or helpful behaviors that we've previously discussed, we need to immediately acknowledge these efforts. This could be as simple as actively listening to the individual as they express their frustrations, maybe using words more effectively. It might involve following through with their turn on the iPad after patiently waiting for their brother to finish. And by doing this, you're helping to shape more helpful and productive behaviors in the future by showing them how effective these behaviors can be. So when you notice the individual is making progress towards a positive behavior, you're going to respond by providing help or comfort that they're seeking. And this way, their behavior is naturally reinforced. So they're getting access to that help or comfort that they're looking for, and that will reinforce the behavior and shape that behavior and make it more likely to happen again. So just a little summary image, because I know there's a lot of words there and steps. It's just to put it all together. The first step is to validate emotionally, to understand their emotions in relation to the situation. Then we're going to attempt to scaffold a behavior by facilitating an opportunity for them. So we're going to scaffold and support them without explicitly solving the problem. Then the next step is going to be paying attention and waiting. So wait and watch, and at a certain distance. And then during any of these steps, so what I don't think I made clear is the reinforcement piece doesn't need to wait until all of these steps. This can happen very quickly. You can reflect, and as soon as you go to scaffold, there might be that adaptive behavior or approach or an approximation of an adaptive behavior, and you can get in and reinforce. We're not waiting, we don't need to wait out till maybe the adaptive behavior has occurred and is finished, and then what happens is we accidentally reinforce a less preferred behavior. And that takes us to the end. So what are our key points? What did we just cover? I know a lot, probably a lot of information in 45 minutes, but emotion dysregulation predicts increases in social and behavioral difficulties across time. So that's what we're looking at initially. And also remembering how I mentioned that this can stay stable over time if supports aren't put in place. A big thing, the feelings aren't the problem, it's our responses or reactions to them. So we're not trying to shape the feelings. We're not trying to change the feelings. We are trying to shape the behaviors. And us as caregivers can support emotion regulation through co-regulation. And then what we looked at was the connect and shape model that can be used to support individuals emotionally while encouraging safer and more helpful behaviors. And I've surprised myself and managed to stay on time. So thank you all for listening. If somebody doesn't get an opportunity to ask questions, or if you're watching this on playback, my email address is there, link to our website and social media. So please, we'd love to hear from you, reach out, and yeah, thank you guys for listening.
Joeleen, thanks a million. I really, really enjoyed that. I really like the area of self-regulation and emotional regulation. So it's really, really nice to have gotten your presentation on it and to get an insight to the work that you're doing. I just want to point out to people who are maybe raising their hands that we're not facilitating question asking live. There's a question and answer function in the symbols down below that Alan brought you through already. So if you have a question, please type it in there and the support in the background will feed it forward so that we can ask it from Joeleen. So yeah, look, Joeleen, I have a couple of questions. I actually have a lot of questions, but I know we probably don't have time for all of that. I've kind of been reflecting on some of the reading I've done around kind of emotional regulation and self-regulation. And I'm thinking about the kind of work that Heather McKenzie has done, and she's talked about the need for calm children, where she talks about calm, alert, and nourished, in order to be able to self-regulate and the role that plays in emotional regulation. I wonder if you could speak to those broader factors that are important to ensure that when we are supporting emotional regulation, that it's not hampered by things that are outside of maybe the emotional response right there. So, you know, that we are supporting people to be rested, to mind their health in other ways, and the importance they play in emotional regulation.
Yeah, I guess I covered that more under the caregivers, but I didn't speak about it specifically in relation to the children. And I know children, I keep saying children because, like I said, it's who I work with. But I suppose purpose of time, I didn't go into that. But the same principles would apply for those we're supporting. So setting events, as we would call them, making sure that children, not making sure, being aware of, because we often don't have control over how much sleep an individual is having, or someone's diet, and how much their food intake is. We don't have control over the noise volume and often big environments when we go to town. So I feel like it's more having an awareness of and being able to do your best to put supports in place. So offering opportunities for a child to have that bedtime routine, to establish sleep routines, trying to encourage them to eat regularly and drink during the day. I know for myself, when I'm supporting individuals in a school, sometimes a very small change, like noticing that a child wakes up at 6 a.m. in the morning and has their breakfast, and then they watch TV or hang out, and then they go to school and they appear very dysregulated. And no one has kind of noticed that that child hasn't actually eaten their breakfast since 6 a.m. this morning. So a very simple change that I might recommend and have often recommended is when they enter school first, start their day with a drink and a snack.
Yeah.
And give them time to make sure that they're nourished and they have a break, because, you know, I'm saying 6 a.m. Some of these individuals are awake 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. They've done a day's work before they even get into, and I'm saying school because that's, I suppose, the example or where I'd find, but checking in and communicating across settings. When have they eaten? Have they slept well? What has happened? Did something go wrong this morning? And just being aware of them setting events. And obviously, you, I, us all will be dysregulated if we are hungry, tired, and if something has went terribly wrong in the morning. And we know for the people we support, something that might be small to one person could be disastrous to another. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I know you're talking about children there, but that applies across the kind of lifespan. That's as important to when we're working with adults in variety of settings also. Sometimes people are coming to educational settings or social care settings, and they've been on buses for an hour or an hour and a half, and that acknowledgement that there could be hunger, tiredness, thirst, whatever is really important, and that we don't just have this expectation that this is the start of the day. You know, the day has started quite early for a lot of people that we're working with. And I suppose talking about the different settings that we're working in too, Joeleen, I often find that whether it's an educational setting or a social care setting, quite often our focus is on academic skill acquisition, or it's on occupational skill acquisition, or activities of daily living, you know. And what we know from the research, and you've highlighted, is that actually self-regulation and emotional regulation are key indicators of wellness throughout life, and that they improve outcomes for people across that lifespan. So how do you think we could approach maybe rebalancing the focus in some of the settings where we are delivering support, so that we don't give primacy to those kind of academic or occupational skills to the detriment of maybe the importance of self-regulation or emotional regulation?
I suppose creating an awareness of, and I'm going to highlight one program some of you might be aware of, others not. Dr. Sarah Cassidy has Magpie's program, and that is teaching emotion regulation to school-age children. And I know that mightn't be relevant to all of the audience or across populations or depending on skill level, but we know that the children, adults we're supporting are less likely to engage in the curriculum or whatever it might be, because the skills we're teaching them, because they're dysregulated. I suppose, how do we share that information and make that known? I suppose it's through events like this. It's doing community events where parents, caregivers, social care workers are able to come and attend and listen to the research and listen to how they can approach that and embed them strategies into their day, and making it known that it's okay. And it's something that I feel I'm regularly doing is, it's okay to park the academics, it's okay to park the curriculum, because that's not the most important thing. Because until these children and adults are regulated and are able to access preferred activities, and it's not important to be able to read X amount or write. It's much more important that they're able to feel, I suppose, that security, feel okay environments, and just be regulated, I guess.
Yeah. And it goes back to that earlier point, is that, you know, in order to learn, people need to be calm, they need to be alert, they need to be nourished, they need to be ready. And sometimes if we're trying to stick to a curriculum or whatever it is without those things in place, that really, it's wasted effort.
And I think it's important to just to go back and highlight the piece around calm, because I think a lot of us view or imagine calmness to be a still person.
Yes.
That's sitting down and they're, you know, this kind of a ready to learn, when many of us, ourselves included, don't learn that way. So being calm isn't that you're sitting on your desk or at the dinner table or sitting on the bus, you know, hands on your lap, eyes facing forward. You know, we're talking about calmness in their bodies, and they're able to express what they're feeling. And when they're feeling frustrated, like I was talking about, that they can tell us whatever way they communicate that they're frustrated. And that is also calmness. That is being regulated. It isn't that appearance of, you know.
It's not that, as you say, kind of desk-bound stuff. It is that kind of that adaptive regulation to the different response, the different environments that you're in. And in terms of kind of approaching people who are supporting emotional regulation in people, again, across the lifespan, whether strategies or approaches should differ based on whether or not somebody is neurodivergent or neurotypical. You know, is there adaptation that we need to be considering in some of the strategies that you've outlined?
I think every strategy should be individualized. So there are guidelines, and how you approach it and what the behaviors will look like for each individual is very different. I know I'm saying like offer a hug or a touch, or I give examples of how that person would communicate. This is going to completely depend on the individual. So it's just being mindful of the person you're supporting and what their needs are, and not trying to fit everyone into one box, or using, here is a written program and we're going to follow these exact steps for each individual, when that 4 steps of shaping might be 50 steps for another individual.
And I think that's a key point that you made, is that it's not a recipe book, you know, that we're dealing with individuals, and we're dealing with people with different histories and different traumas, different learning experiences. So the mindfulness to be aware that people have different things that will influence how they regulate and what regulation will look like for them is really, really important. And then kind of thinking about the process of regulation, like, I mean, you know, from infancy upwards, we're talking that initially emotions are regulated externally, you know, then we move to a kind of co-regulation process. And eventually there's that process of kind of handing over where, you know, a lot of the regulation that we do is internalized. And so I guess I'm thinking about, with young children, there's a very obvious process that we engage in there. But when we get to adults who maybe haven't had the experience of developing emotional regulation skills in infancy and childhood, you know, and maybe are continuing to experience dysregulation into adulthood, how do you think we should approach that kind of co-regulation piece and that kind of process of transferring control to the person in a way that is respectful of their adulthood?
Yeah, I find that is where a lot of the difficulty arises. So when you do your shushing your baby, you're patting their back, you're picking them up, carrying them. And a lot of the individuals we support still require and seek that type of comfort to regulate. They still want to be, I'm speaking very general, but some still want to, you know, get that physical comfort, and they're maybe still getting that at home, and maybe mom and dad are still, they can hop up in the lap and get the hugs and squeezes. But then we go into your day center, you go into your school, and staff don't know then how do we achieve regulation. We can't engage in the same behaviors and we can't support them the same way. So trying to shape alternatives that offer similar feedback. So maybe it is using like physical touch doesn't need to be a hug only. Maybe it's a more appropriate tap on the back. A lot of individuals like want and seek, you know, just physical touch to know you're there. That can be your high five. It can be a tap on the back. It would really depend again, and I find I do struggle with this in trying to find techniques that work, because I feel like it's an awful lot of, I know for myself, feels like an awful lot of trial and error, trying techniques, and often it's kind of using external things. So I'm going to give some examples of where like temperature can help regulate your body instead of more touch. So some individualized support really like the feeling of, you know, freezing cold ice, kind of connecting, trying to ground their bodies by using temperature. It might be some intense exercise. I'm thinking of tips here. So changing the temperature of your body, maybe it's like, you know yourself, you throw water on your face for a cold splash, it can help you feel more grounded. So that could be a person chewing or holding ice. Maybe for a small child, it might be just playing with, maybe it might be offering a drink with ice to an adult. It might be heat that someone enjoys. It might be allowing them, because I feel like as well with this, a lot of individuals, when they're regulating at home, using maybe they're bouncing off walls or jumping on a trampoline with intensity, that when they come into another environment, that this is no longer seen as an appropriate behavior. The exact same behavior is allowed. So trying to come up with ways where, and allowing a little bit more, being flexible yourself. It can't be the same rules for everybody. You know, jumping on a trampoline intensively, if that supports someone's regulation and you have spoken to their parent or carer and you agree that this is helpful, we don't need to be so picky and be like, oh, they're making noise when they're bouncing or it's hitting the wall, and being, if this is helpful and we can try and shape that behavior towards a more, if we want to say appropriate behavior, again, confusing because it's appropriate in one setting for the individual and not. So I don't know, is that helpful, Phil?
Yeah, I think so. And I guess
gone on a bit of a path.
No, and I agree with you. I think it's really important that we are aware that, you know, we're applying subjective judgments when we say something is appropriate or not appropriate to some extent, you know. And for me, the appropriateness is whether or not the thing works as a regulation tool for somebody, and it's not harmful to them or anyone else, you know. Like, for me, that's what it comes down to in a lot of ways. And if so, like, we all have our own maybe idiosyncratic ways of regulating, you know. So nobody's coming along and telling us it's appropriate in one setting, not appropriate in another. We engage in what works for us from a regulation perspective. So I think we need to be respectful of people's needs in our different settings. And if that is something that somebody needs to regulate and it is not harmful, I'm not sure I see the challenge in it from that perspective. I have a question here that's come in from Dave. Thanks, Dave. Dave would like to know whether or not you see a role for ACT or mindfulness support for staff in this. So how would you integrate that into an emotional regulation model for people supporting ACT and mindfulness within the staff?
Yes, the question is, how would I, or do I? Sorry, Phil.
Would you see a role for ACT and mindfulness support for staff in this? And I assume this is emotional regulation.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose yes, and that was what I was trying to very quickly run through in the slides, using them core processes to help yourself become more psychologically flexible and then improve your emotional well-being through ACT. And when we are approaching staff, we are trying to incorporate that into our plans. But it's very helpful, I think, parents as well as staff. We're trying to support the individual we're assigned to support, and we don't actually support ourselves. And we're ending up with teacher, staff burnout, practitioner burnout, when we're supporting the individual heavily and forgetting about ourselves. And that's what I was trying to portray, is that we need to be regulated ourselves. And yes, 100% ACT is an amazing tool for developing psychological flexibility, which will improve your emotional well-being. And yeah, I think I'm just agreeing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm mindful of time. We're coming up to the end of this session. So I guess while there's loads of questions, and I'd love to ask all of them and have a longer conversation, just to ask you that if parents or early year practitioners or educators or social care staff or people who work directly with others are looking for some basic resources or a place to start, where would you guide them in terms of accessing those resources initially?
Well, we ourselves have some resources on our website. We have some blogs, and I can share some links. I didn't actually put them at the end. In terms of parents, Smithfield Clinic and Athboy and ourselves run emotion regulation groups for 8 to 12-year-olds. So they're available. Again, you can send an email, and yeah, I can maybe, I'm not sure how this is being shared afterwards, but maybe I can share a resources page if that's appropriate, Phil.
That would be excellent. Yeah, that would really love that. Joeleen, thanks so much. We're finishing on time, which is amazing for me. I'll credit you with that. Thanks a million for that. Really, really enjoyed it. I think we're taking a coffee break now. Is that right, Alan? And then we'll be back at 11, where Nicola Booth will be doing the next presentation on autism in the air, which I think is going to be really worthwhile for anybody who is supporting families who are trying to live their best lives and support people to have the best quality of life and access all the benefits that we do also. Joeleen, thanks a million. Folks, see you at 11.
Thank you.